that girl alive and you killed my sister.
They started fucking with her. Just like that. Just like that, nigga. That nigga started playing. That nigga walked out and started fucking with my brother.
You gonna see me for the rest of your life. You gonna see me for the rest of your life. You know we got it on us. We've been quiet for too long, bitch. We've been quiet too long. You should have told me who the fuck we was.
Well, they just beat the white shit off
You gonna see pay for the rest of your life. You told Holly who the fuck we was. We've been too quiet. This is a real trouble. You confused. You know exactly who the fuck we are. You ruined that girl's life and you killed my sister.
In Chicago, the morning began like any other for Romeca Meeks-Blackmon. She was doing what countless parents do every day, taking her child to school. There was nothing unusual about her routine. It was familiar, predictable, and safe. But according to prosecutors, this ordinary morning would soon take a devastating turn. After dropping her son off, Romeca remained in the area near the school. It was here that she encountered Quadajah Holly Johnson. Authorities say the two women knew of each other, and tensions between them had existed prior to that day. What happened next is at the center of the case. Prosecutors describe an interaction that quickly escalated. What may have started as a verbal confrontation did not remain that way for long. Witnesses reported raised voices and a heated exchange, something that drew attention from those nearby. But the situation didn't de-escalate. Instead, it intensified. According to the prosecution, the argument reached a critical point where decisions were made in seconds, decisions that could not be undone. Moments later, the situation turned deadly. For investigators, understanding what led up to that exact moment is key. Every second before the shooting matters. Every action, every word, every movement helps build the timeline they would later present in court. Because in cases like this, it's not just about what happened. It's about what led to it. And as prosecutors began piecing together that timeline, they believed they had a clear picture of how a normal morning turned into a tragedy. Backhand index pointing right, continue to Chapter 2 for what prosecutors say happened next. Like, share, and subscribe. As prosecutors laid out their case in Chicago, the focus shifted to the moments immediately after Romeca Meeks-Blackmon dropped her child off at school. According to their account, the interaction with Quadajah Holly Johnson was not random. There was already tension. Prosecutors stated that the two women encountered each other near the school, and what followed was a verbal exchange that escalated quickly. Witnesses described raised voices and visible frustration, drawing attention from people nearby. But this wasn't just an argument. It was a situation building toward something more serious. According to the prosecution's timeline, neither side immediately walked away. Instead, the confrontation continued, with emotions intensifying. The environment, public, crowded, and tense, only added to the pressure of the moment. Investigators later focused on these exact seconds. Because this is where intent, reaction, and decision-making all intersect. Prosecutors argue that what happened next was not a sudden, unpredictable act, but the result of a confrontation that had already escalated beyond control. They pointed to witness statements that suggested the situation could have ended differently if one party had disengaged. But that didn't happen. Instead, the argument reached a critical point. And in that moment, everything changed. For those nearby, it unfolded quickly. What started as words turned into something far more serious in a matter of seconds. For investigators, this phase of the timeline is crucial because it answers one key question: how did it get to that point? As prosecutors continued presenting their timeline in Chicago, they focused on the most critical point in the case: the exact moment the confrontation turned deadly. According to their account, the argument between Romeca Meeks-Blackmon and Quadajah Johnson had already escalated beyond a simple disagreement. Witnesses described a tense and emotional exchange, with both individuals engaged in the confrontation. But prosecutors emphasized that what happened next was a decisive shift. They stated that during the confrontation, a firearm was produced. This action, they argued, marked the point where the situation moved from verbal conflict to immediate danger. In that moment, everything changed. According to witness statements presented by the prosecution, there was little time for anyone nearby to react. The situation unfolded rapidly, leaving those present shocked by how quickly it escalated. Then the shots were fired. Prosecutors argued that this was not an accidental outcome of chaos, but a direct result of the choices made in those final seconds of the confrontation. Their case focused on establishing that the act was intentional and that the escalation leading to it followed a clear sequence. For investigators, this moment became the centerpiece of the case. Everything before it built toward this point. Everything after it would be shaped by it. And for the community, it was the moment an ordinary morning turned into a tragedy that would not be forgotten. In Chicago, the moments after the shooting were chaotic and fast-moving. According to prosecutors, once the shots were fired and Romeca Meeks-Blackmon was struck, the scene shifted instantly from confrontation to emergency. Witnesses described panic, people reacting in shock, some stepping back, others trying to understand what had just happened. Calls to 911 were made within seconds. First responders were dispatched quickly, arriving to find a scene that had already drawn attention from bystanders. Their priority was immediate, providing aid and securing the area. But prosecutors also focused on what happened in those same moments, involving Quadajah Johnson. According to their account, after the shooting, actions were taken that became part of the investigation's timeline. Law enforcement worked to determine movements, responses, and behavior immediately following the incident, because what happens after an event can be just as important as what happens during it. Witnesses provided statements describing what they saw, helping investigators piece together the sequence of events. Surveillance footage from the surrounding area was also reviewed, adding another layer of detail to the timeline. For prosecutors, this phase helped reinforce their argument. It wasn't just about the confrontation. It was about the full sequence, from the first interaction to the final moments on the scene. And as the evidence continued to come together, the picture became clearer. A routine morning had turned into a tragedy in a matter of moments. As the investigation continued in Chicago, prosecutors began turning the events of that morning into a structured case. Every detail surrounding the death of Romeca Meeks-Blackmon had to be carefully examined, verified, and presented in a way that clearly showed what happened and why. This process wasn't quick. It required precision. Investigators gathered witness statements from those who saw the confrontation between Romeca and Quadajah Johnson. Each account helped build a clearer timeline, confirming how the argument escalated and what led to the moment prosecutors described as intentional. Surveillance footage from nearby areas was also reviewed. While it didn't capture every second of the confrontation, it helped support the sequence of events before and after the shooting. Then came forensic evidence. Ballistics, scene analysis, and medical reports all played a role in confirming how the shooting occurred. These details weren't just technical, they were essential in strengthening the prosecution's argument. Together, this evidence formed a consistent narrative. one that prosecutors believed showed not just what happened, but how and why it happened. For the legal team, the goal was clear: to present a case that left no room for doubt. For the defense, however, this same evidence would be examined from a different perspective, challenged, questioned, and interpreted in another way. Because in court, evidence doesn't just exist. It's debated. And as both sides prepared for what came next, one thing became clear. The final outcome would depend on how this evidence was presented and understood. As the case in Chicago moves toward its next phase, prosecutors have made one thing clear. They believe the timeline surrounding Romeca Meeks-Blackmon's death shows a sequence of actions that led directly to the outcome. From the initial encounter, to the escalation, to the moment the shots were fired. Each step, according to prosecutors, forms a complete picture. Their argument centers on intent. They maintain that what happened that morning involving Quadajah, Holly, Johnson was not random or accidental, but the result of a confrontation that escalated to a point where a critical decision was made. A decision with permanent consequences. For the family of Romeca, the legal process represents something deeper than just a case. It is about accountability, clarity, and the hope that the full truth will be recognized in court. But beyond the courtroom, this story has left a lasting impact. It has raised questions about conflict, reaction, and how quickly situations can change. A routine morning, one that began with a school drop-off, ended in a way no one could have predicted. And that reality stays with people, because it shows how fragile everyday moments can be. As the case continues, the final outcome will ultimately be decided through the legal system. But the narrative presented by prosecutors has already shaped how many understand what happened. And for many, one question remains: could this have been prevented? Backhand index pointing right if this story gave you a deeper understanding. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real case breakdowns.